We got 50 in the room about 3 seconds before the top of the hour, and I jumped in because I like to do that. But Elathea, hi, happy Detroit Festival of Books Day to you. There is a Detroit Festival of Books. I've never been to it, but I got friends who are displaying down there right now. I've got some friends who are authors in and around the Detroit area. So a lot of good people in the house, a lot of my good friends I see every week. I appreciate that. I missed you guys last week. I had something else to do that popped up at the last minute. I apologize for that. But I am here more often than I'm not. So there you go. But a lot of people around, like I said, Carl's Corner remembers when the drinking ages moved back and forth a couple times. Mark Miller, of course, Prodigal Stranger, Dan Boyd, Art S, Airplane Mechanic, Pray for Camp Mystic. Yeah. Michael Hoyland, greetings, Earthlings. Are you not also an Earthling? I bet you are. Yeah, Boomer, Carl's Corner. Turning 21 took all the fun and challenge out of it. And I know a lot of people will tell you that they pretty much stopped drinking hard when they turned 21 because it wasn't fun anymore. So I am McNathan. Hello, everyone from Sun City Center, Florida. Dead Dog Rising. Good afternoon, Steve. That's a name I don't remember seeing previously. American Tours, hello. Great to have you live again. Andrew Zubke, hello, all you beautiful people. As an optimist for you. Lewis Browning, afternoon, professor. Daniel Kester reminds that you could buy a yard of beer. I've seen those. They often have the comically novelty type things to see, or they'll bring out a margarita dispenser that looks like, Hey, JP is checking in from I-77 North. JP is my good friend in South Carolina who told me yesterday that it's getting hot and muggy in South Carolina, which it tends to do this time of year. So, Mary Hahn or Hain, hello, everyone from Minnesota. And Matthias says, greetings from Berlin. Your t-shirt will arrive on the 24th of July. Really? I've been looking for this t-shirt. I so hope it fits. Even if it doesn't, I'll make sure to get it on camera. But Matthias, I hope you put an address in there. I'll send you a care package from the United States of America. So Ram 50 V8 says it is, in fact, very warm and a bit humid in Harrison, Arkansas. Michelle My Bell. That's a song, Michelle My Bell. Hello. Fly Chomper Fly Chicagoland. PWNULOLUMAD, which could be Ponyu, LOL, mad. Are you mad? Steve, I watched your Cobra video after you mentioned it in a previous live. Very nice, man. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I had the Viper out earlier this year, but I've had the Cobra out recently. I took the Cobra on a pretty decent long drive. Friday afternoon, went down to my favorite restaurant on the planet, had dinner, and then drove back, taking country roads all the way. It's always a lot of fun. So, Dr. Theopolis, howdy from Dexter, Michigan. I've run the Dexter Ann Arbor half marathon several times. A very, very fun race. It runs along the Huron River for much of its length. And so it's a very, very gradual downhill run, which is always nice. So, Witness Multi-Chick says, hey, Steve, great to catch you on a live stream. Thank you. I appreciate that, my friend. Bob Blah Blah says the wife keeps the air conditioner down so far I have to wear a sweater in the house. I've known people who had AC and didn't use it because they're trying to save money. It's like, why do you have it? Matthias says that is what the Postal Service predicted. Address and some additional historical artifacts are included. Cool. I'll look for those. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Like I said, I will send you back something equally, if not more so, impressive in exchange. Scott Summers, McDonald's and Bad Axe. Are you asking if there is one or was there one? There is one. It is still there. I ate at it a couple of years ago. I drove my Viper up there specifically to go visit that McDonald's. So I hadn't eaten there since 1983, I think it was. So CyberDoc says, I thought you were on paid administrative leave. Yeah, but they cleared me of wrongdoing and made me come back to work. But don't worry, they paid me. Oh boy. Fly Chomper Fly, any stories about radar detectors? Any thoughts, pro or con? Nowadays, I don't know if you need a radar detector. Most mapping software, if you're running it live in your car, will say, police reported ahead. And they'll often be really accurate. I have not owned a radar detector, nor have I encountered one in quite some time, trying to remember what the current state of the law is on those. But it was always a game of cat and mouse between the law enforcement and the people who had the detectors of some sort. So, Prodigal Stranger, I listened to the Foiled album by Blue October. I get why he doesn't want to perform some of those songs anymore. I mentioned a couple weeks back that Blue October is one of my favorite bands. They've got a song called She's My Ride Home off the album Foiled, and they don't play it live. And I've seen them perform 5 or 6 times now. And it bums me out when bands don't play the one song I want to hear them play. And but I saw Justin Furstenfeld perform a solo set where he talks a lot, explains a lot about the music and stuff. And he said that yeah, that song in particular, "She's My Ride Home," he does not like to perform it anymore. It reminds him too much, I believe he said, of his first marriage. So, so I get that. I get that. But I'd still like to hear the song performed live. So I guess we're at an impasse. William Holcomb says illegal in Virginia still, referring to radar detectors. Yeah, because some states say that those are designed to do nothing but help you evade the law. And I know there have been some fights on that. And like I said, I'm not, I don't really follow them that much. I've not even had any people ask about them. It's so long that I kind of just assumed everybody was just watching the Waze or Google mapping software that'll tell you that people have reported something ahead. So yeah, Andrew Zupke, I just watched that video. I too wish I had that job. The guy who's been on administrative leave for years and years and years, and they've paid him hundreds of thousands of dollars in salary over all that time, which is greatly in excess of the amount that he claimed they're investigating him for. So it makes you wonder. Oh, Scott Summers, I thought that you meant that you went to it in the Viper. Yes, I did. I drove the Viper to the McDonald's specifically to kind of bury the hatchet there in Bad Axe, which is a bad pun, but I had to do it. Glenn Brown, can you be reached at the law office? Your best way to reach me, if you want to reach me, is to email me most likely. The problem I have is, unfortunately, I get a lot of calls, emails, and so on at my office that have nothing to do with my law practice. They're from YouTube. And I know people say, but Steve, you're a lawyer. And then it'll happen is that something happens like somebody calls me from Utah and says, I got a problem with the zoning commission in Utah. And I'm like, I can't help you. Well, if you're in Utah, could you help me? Yeah, I could, but I'm not in Utah. If I was in Michigan, could you help me? Yeah, but you're not in Michigan. I'm not trying to be difficult. It's just that I'm not allowed to. And I know what would happen if I gave somebody advice. They'd go, well, this guy in Michigan gave me bad advice. Oh, really? Well, you've got a malpractice action then. Blah blah blah. Do you still own two Explorers? Yes, I do. I will tell you that I'm probably gifting one of them because I have at the moment a large population of cars. I don't need all of them. And so what I decided to do is I need some help with something. And one of my brothers uh, is capable of helping me. And I wanted to encourage him. So I said, hey, I understand you're looking for a vehicle with a tow hitch. I actually have an extra one. I think we can work something out. So Joe Palmer, happy Moon Day, everyone. July 20th, 1969. That is correct, my friend. I always remember July 20th and 69 as a big, big deal. Elementary school. Oh my gosh. So, Carl's Corner, your car warranty is up. I was getting those within weeks of buying a brand new vehicle. About a brand new vehicle, I go out to the mailbox and there's a thing that says, your warranty has expired. I'm like, no, it hasn't. But Andrew Zupke, I've seen people who are lawyers say, I am a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. Fatting Butterpants, more than four cars is called a gaggle. Or a herd, Herd. But yeah. Socum Cygnus, if your old Explorer has the 4.6 liter, I need the engine. I've got whichever one is the bulletproof one, because it's got 160,000 miles on it. I bought it at 75, but I've had several of those engines, and those engines are bulletproof. I've never had anything go wrong with any of them. So, William Holcomb says barter and trade is how the West was won. Well, you got to understand, at some point in time, it's not about the money. I could hire someone to do what I want to have done, but I'd rather, spend the afternoon with my brother, kicking kicking stuff around, as we used to say, and do something and know it got done right, and not have to argue with somebody. Blah blah blah. I have a pride of cars. A pride of cars. Vinny Sluga says, I called the police about the car in front of my house. It's not your car, I take it? Andrew Zupke is someone who wasn't alive. What happened on today's date in 1969? A couple guys went for a stroll on the moon. Angels don't fall. Says hi, I guess. Yeah, Boomer 4 Cars is considered a used car lot. I actually know a place about 10 miles from me. I drive by it quite a bit, though, where there's a guy who's got a different vehicle for sale every time I go by, meaning that whatever he's got there will sell, and he'll have something right back out, right back out. So Bob Bong, hey, Steve from Niles, Michigan. Niles, Michigan. I was just thinking about this the other day because Tommy James of the Shondells, I believe he's still touring. I need to see him. I need to see him perform one time. Angels don't fall off a graveyard of trucks. Okay, that's the name of a group of vehicles that aren't going anyplace, that are slowly sinking into the ground. Scott Argott, hi, Steve. Chris Better, I have 6 trucks, all General Motors. Silicon Cygnus is except when they blow spark plugs out. Never had that happen. Yeah, Andrew Kruchowski says, and Mike Collins watched from the control module. And that, of course, is the sad part. Did they draw straws? Like, one of you doesn't get to walk on the moon. Bikes and bullets. Do you know of or ever heard of a judge or attorney charging another attorney with barratry or ambulance chasing? The rules on that are fairly clear cut. Every now and then I've heard stories, but it's been a while. But, someone will suffer a grievous injury, and next thing, an attorney will just bump into them like, you're do you need an attorney? And the most famous example of that, sadly, was Flight 255 out of Detroit, where an airplane was taking off. And I'm not going to get into why the crash occurred, but a crash occurred shortly after takeoff. Everyone on board passed except for one little kid who's still alive, the sole survivor. And out of nowhere, in all this confusion and stuff, as they blocked off the area and doing an investigation, and relatives were showing up, a man dressed as a priest showed up, started walking amongst the victims' families and saying things like, "Oh, if you need any help, if I can do anything to help you, I'm here to comfort you. Would you like to pray? By the way, do you need an attorney?" And he just happened to have a stack of cards for an attorney. And later on, somebody accused the attorney of doing some kind of chicanery, and he's like, "I have no idea who that guy was. No idea." And why was he doing it? But that was a long time ago. That was literally, over 30 years ago. So Michael Hoyland says Mike Collins was briefly the most alone person in the world. Yeah, think about it, as he's orbiting the moon, when he's on the far side, Vinny Sluga, my dad's out of the hospital, and says, thanks everyone for their support. Yes, we were giving him moral support the entire time. You're welcome. Renzo's retro games and metal music and dogs. Hey, Steve, always listening to your stuff. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Oh, Art S points out, if you question whether or not we went to the moon, Buzz Aldrin might punch you. James Rowan, I have a 2000 Chevy Blazer with 356,000 miles and still running strong. I've never gotten a vehicle past 250. I got one to 237, 238, right around there. It was still running, but let's just say it was jogging. It wasn't running. Oh. Witness multi-chick. I heard Jared Leto had a cult. Is he a relative? No. In fact, I don't even think he's Finnish. Lehto, Lehto is a Finnish name. I think Leto is not, but I could be wrong about that. There is a an actress named Christine Lahti, Lahti, who is Finnish. But I like Jared Leto. I liked him all the way back in my so-called life. I also liked him in his band 30 Seconds to Mars. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, look up his performance where he shows up. Oh, what's the Rock Am Ring? It's the German big outdoor concert, and 30 Seconds to Mars does a set there. Very very impressive. He's got the pink mohawk going. That guy's got more energy than the Energizer Bunny, and he's actually very talented, not just as an actor but also as a singer. William Holcomb, an American-made car, went 250,000 miles. Yeah, yeah. News Now NME says I got a Ranger with 278 jogging. James Chisholm, my old Mercedes diesel, made it over 450,000 miles. Yeah, diesels in particular are known to often run for quite a distance. Isaac Bob York says my colleague is named Lehti, Lehti, which is a combination of Lehto and Lati. And I don't say Lehto properly. But Jeremy Fergus, how about a trivia question? I don't generally do trivia. When I was on the radio, I refused to do those things. Like, hey, it's Tuesday trivia and it's Monday movies, and it's like, oh, okay. Stephanie, I remembers him from My So-Called Life. Of course you do. A lot of the female folk do remember him from My So-Called Life. Pawn, you LOL, you mad. Have you ever made a video about the Alex Jones trial? I don't remember if I did or not. Because it just seems terribly political, no matter how you slice it. It's hard to do it in such a way that people won't think you're taking sides. There was the interesting aspect of it, though, where Alex Jones's attorneys apparently accidentally sent some documents to opposing counsel that they thought were private, and they didn't object soon enough. In fact, I don't think they objected in time or at all. And so, because of that, he got to use them, the opposing counsel did, and cross examine him. And it was probably the most interesting part of the trial, that and the jury verdict, which was quite large. But Prodigal Stranger says, if you like 30 Seconds to Mars and Blue October, check out a band called Ashes Divide. Okay, never heard of them. I'll have to do that. Sniper 1080, yo, 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 Steve, sup, mate? What would it take to remove all the blocks on cheap cars? Blocks. What do you mean by blocks? Are you talking about removing like all the dumb things like auto start stop and all the stupid warnings that come on? Modern cars drive me crazy, and I'm not the old man shaking his fist at clouds. I've finally gotten rid of a bunch of things that are bothering me. It no longer tells me that I'm asleep. I got to stop doing that, but it's still, I got to get in and hit the auto stop start. So, blah, blah, blah says 42, which of course is the answer to the life, the universe, and everything. But of course, on what is the question? Dirk Rameswinkel, did your family ever go camping? Oh, yeah. Interesting camping stories? It's hard to say how interesting they are. So I'm the youngest of five. I have five older brothers, and the youngest is six boys. And my mother, bless her, would take us camping, and my dad couldn't go quite often because of his schedule, and so there'd be seven people in this big circus tent. My mom and six boys, and we camped at Twin Lakes in the UP and a bunch of other places. I remember many times at Twin Lakes, which is not far from Winona, west of Baraga, and Alston and Nisula, and northwest. And had a great time camping up there. Had a great time, but nothing terribly newsworthy. Just the typical stuff. I talked about going fishing with my brother. My brother Dave passed away in April of this year, and he and I used to go trout fishing. And it wasn't about the trout; it was about just hiking in the woods and seeing stuff, and it was a lot of fun. So freaking awesome! I'm still driving my '97 F-150 with 300,000 miles, but the odometer broke. Now it's stuck. I hate when that happens. Mrs. Teresa, 1999 says, "Hi, Steve. We missed you the last few weeks, and last week you weren't even on." Well, yeah, I apologize. I'm sorry. It would have been nice to meet you for cruising night, but not this year. Maybe next. Yeah, you told me they canceled it this year, but wishing you a wonderful week. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yeah, I've gone out to a couple car show kind of things this year, but it all depends on the weather and how far away they are and what else I've got going on. Unfortunately, I actually have gotten kind of busy lately. So Jonesman '08. I wonder if the Grateful Dead's Phil Lesh was of Nordic background. I have no idea. I'm not a big Grateful Dead fan. I know people out there are. So Isaac Bob York says, I think Lehto means leave in Finnish, like a leaf on a tree, I think. Or are you talking about the verb? Well, Lehto means grove. Yeah, and Lehto does, in fact, mean a grove of trees. And so it's often a lot of Finnish names have meaning, and it's often a place or a thing, like a lake, forest, mountains, hills, peninsulas, things of that nature. And a lot of people just simply took the earliest family names were places or the names of a farm if you worked on a farm. So Jerry DeMoss says, I shook my fist at clouds, but they started it. That's like when Stephen writes, his curiosity killed the cat, but for a while I was a suspect. By the way, the 30 Seconds to Mars song, I just realized I forgot to say it was called Closer to the Edge. Closer to the Edge. Art S says, I think you did Alex Jones' lawyer's botch story. I might have. I don't remember. I've done several thousand videos now, but I also look at tons of stuff I don't use. And so I forget which ones I do, which ones I don't do. And so I I've had someone say, "Hey, you already did a video on this." I'm like, "When?" I do a word search and I'm like, "Oh, I did." But I don't have like a comprehensive index of all the videos I've done. That right there would be the straw that breaks the camel's back. So Mark Keppel, hello from Buffalo, New York. My wife's first time watching your live. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That implies that you've watched, but she is not. I like Buffalo. And it's not terribly far from Fredonia, is it? Because Fredonia, of course, is where Douglas Houghton was from. And I wrote a book about Douglas Houghton. I've never been to Fredonia, but I've been to Buffalo many times. And it's a very, very cool town. I do feel sorry for how much snow you guys get. You often get lake effect snow off Lake Erie. And seemingly Buffalo will get like twice as much snow as anybody else in the Midwest. Pa Rump Mike, did you get any many fist fights with your brothers? Not a lot of fights in that sense, but occasionally you'd get, one or two pushes or slaps thrown in, but we never got into full-blown brawls because there was six of us. If one brother starts hitting another brother would stop it. And of course, you ran the risk of an older brother getting upset about that. Daniel Kester, sorry about your brother, Steve. Thank you. I appreciate that. He passed away on April 3rd. I found out on April 4th. And we had some services for him about a month later. And it's still one of those things that I have an extremely difficult time wrapping my head around because you expect somebody, especially an older brother who's been there your entire life, to remain there your entire life. And you know that it's not always going to happen, but that's what your brain thinks. Art S says, my 1970 Pontiac was a 2-speed auto, thinking that it has manual drum brakes would make it quite difficult to stop. But of course, I missed the first half of the conversation. But the old 2-speed autos, talk about how do you gear that to make it work? And I remember those transmissions quite well. Fly Chomper Fly, WKBW Buffalo. WKBW, Buffalo. David Phillips, what happens if you step over the edge? No, you get closer to the edge, but you don't step over. What are you, crazy? Mrs. Teresa, 1999, says it's only a couple hours from Geneva. Yeah, because I went through Buffalo when I went to Geneva, New York that time back in 2019. Been a long time. I miss being on the radio. Cyberdoc, I don't handle death well. Well, and I knock on wood, but I've been lucky. My mother made it into her 90s, and she just passed away a couple years ago. My father's still around at 94, and 4 of my 5 older brothers are still around. And so, that's a pretty good run for all of us. But standard deviation to slip and slide, power glide. Elathea, my surname means love or affection. I saw an interview with somebody recently whose name was Elathea, and I meant to point it out to you, and I can't remember what it was. Can't remember. Don't know why. Ghost Shadow, hello. Fly Chamber Fly says close to the edge by yes, and closer to the edge by 30 seconds to Mars. Oh, boy. You Can Call Me Al says one of the most popular cars that can be developed this day and age would be a simple car without any of that nanny crap. Well, that's what they're trying to do with the Slate vehicle. The Slate vehicle that the people from Amazon are helping back. They say they're going to put out a little miniature pickup truck type vehicle. It'll be electric, but they're talking about simplifying as much of it as they can and then just make it cheap to build, cheap to sell. And if they accomplish that, it'll sell like hotcakes. But that's often the dream. People come in and say, I want to do this. And then, federal regulations, and then safety people, and then board members. And can't we make it 4-wheel drive? And couldn't we make it, I don't know, amphibious? and someone will come along and by the time they're done, it'll cost $78,000, and it will have all kinds of crazy stuff on it. So Wags 99999 says this is better than the radio. It's interactive. I once did a call-in radio talk show. In fact, I've done several, but the problem there is you can only take one call at a time, and getting in and out of the calls can take some time. Dirk Ramaswinkle, I can't handle death well either, so I'm going to live a long, long life. That's one way of doing it. Just refuse to die. Which, by the way, I got to mention, the movie Sisu. If you haven't seen it yet, Sisu, S-I-S-U, see it. I have it on my DVR. I've watched it 10 or 15 times now. At one point in time, a non-believing Russian says to a captive young lady, do you really believe he is immortal, referring to the protagonist of the movie? And she goes, no, he just refuses to die. That's the thing. And she, of course, says, we do have a word for it, but you wouldn't understand. And yeah. So, hey, Fred Blowers is checking in from Grandville, a town, not a car. And I and 3 other people do get the joke. John Michael Carmer, not going to die, can't afford the gravedigger to cover me up. Yeah, but somebody else pays for it. Dan Boyd, the cameraman never dies. Well, and nowadays you can clip the cameras to your car, and as long as the car survives on some level. Brian Bloomer, I just watched one of your videos on VinWiki. Will you tell us more about the truck that you got bought back twice? That wasn't an old video. That was about 2 weeks ago. But yeah, client of mine had a defective Ford, and we got it bought back. And a couple months later, I get a call from a woman who goes, I just bought a used Ford that's defective. And I said, I'm really sorry, but Lemon Law doesn't cover used cars. And she said, well, I think you'll be interested in this case. I go, why is that? And she goes, it's a car that a truck that you represented the previous owner on. And I'm like, what? And it was. And ironically, the car had been bought back by Ford, taken to an auction and sold. And the dealership that sold it the first time bought it and then sold it to somebody else. And they didn't pass along the papers disclosing it was a Lemon Law buyback. And I said, you never got these papers? She said, no. I filed the lawsuit, and one of my guys at Ford, one of my friends, calls me and goes, hey, Steve, you just filed a case on a used truck. What's up with that? And I go, yeah, it's a former Lemon Law buyback. And he goes, wasn't your client informed? I said, no. And he went and checked the file and he goes, well, don't know how that happened, but yeah, it's getting bought back. And it wasn't bought back by Ford. I mean, they bought it back, but they got the money back, I suspect. And they probably chewed out a dealership and said, by the way, you should really, you know, pass the paperwork along that we require to be passed along. So, Ava Elizabeth, is that a fake wall behind you? Good idea to utilize the space. Yeah, I did a video about that also. So, for about 3 years, my studio was in a building that had a room. It was actually a recording studio of all things. I actually was shooting my videos in a recording studio. And the recording studio was lined with a certain kind of wood. And it had a really, really cool acoustic ceiling. And it was the sound was fabulous in that room. I loved that room. And then I decided to move my studio into this space, and it's a larger space, believe it or not. And but the wall or the ceiling, I guess it goes that way, didn't look quite right. And so I contacted a carpenter I know who was a really good guy. And I said, could you recreate that wall that was behind me in my studio? And so he came into the studio with a ruler, tape measure, and he was measuring things. He goes, well, Steve, you understand that this wood, for instance, these panels are an unusual size. I said, I don't care. I want you to recreate it exactly. So he was custom cutting things. It's all tongue and groove. It cost a bit. And I put the stuff up, and started shooting videos. And people are going, oh, you're back in your studio. Cool. You're back in your studio. And then the first time I did a live, I said, well, I'm gonna commit the sin here and break the wall, the fourth wall, and let you see that that's actually a fake wall. But yeah, but it was I wasn't trying to mislead anybody. I just liked the way it looked. So I was talking too much. A bunch of stories went by that I missed. eBay says, sorry I'm late. What happened with that coin dealer? He went and whined on his post to my reply on your video. I don't want to get too heavily into it, but I did post a video, which I did take down. But I said simply that I'd seen a video where a coin dealer made a comment that I thought was insulting to attorneys. And I said what the comment was. And then I talked about a couple stories I had about coin dealers. I never said his name. I never said the name of his channel. I never linked to anything. I simply said, I heard a coin dealer say this. And apparently, he came onto my channel and started commenting underneath my video. At first, he claimed I misquoted him. Then he said he took him out of context, and he's commenting on my underneath the video. And I had commented underneath his video, and I had simply written the quote with a question mark, kind of like, dude, what's going on here? And he saw that because he commented on the comment above it and below it, but not mine. And so my video went up like 7 plus 4, 11 hours after I saw the video. And he was commenting very, very late at night. And so I emailed him. I sent him an email and I said, hey, I've seen your comments. And instead of having an argument in a public space underneath the video, how about you and I just discuss it via email? He never wrote me back. But I did actually deactivate the video, which I don't do very often. He didn't ask me to. I just did because he said, here's what I was trying to say. And what he was trying to say wasn't that bad. Sadly, it didn't come across that way to me. And I had several other people chime in and send me notes saying, Steve, I think he was trying to say this. And I said, okay, he may have been trying, but that's not what he said. And so I have nothing against the guy. And his explanation makes sense to me. And he did say in one of his comments that he doesn't use scripts, and I understand all about that because I don't either. So I've misspoken before too, and so if he misspoke, I wouldn't hold that against him. I would have appreciated him sending me an email rather than posting stuff on YouTube, because when I have a problem with somebody, I'll email them or call them if I've got a phone number. but I emailed him, and well, let me double check. Just there's a hypothetical chance that he may have emailed me while I'm doing my live stream, but nope, no emails. So I don't know. I don't know. As most of you can guess, I'm a reasonable person, and I'm actually a relatively nice guy. eBay says he likes to claim people are not smart enough to understand what he said. Oh boy, Mr. Bob Newell, first time listener, long time caller. Well, and here's the thing, and I'm going to say this is a general proposition, not with respect to any coin dealers or any other profession out there. But I will tell you right now that I'm speaking to a microphone to you. And if I say something to you that you misunderstand, that's partly my fault. Now, if you say, Steve, I have a completely different understanding of the words than you do. So when you say you, I think you mean them. And when you say airplane, I think you mean submarine. Okay, well, I can't deal with that. But if I'm using the language and you misunderstand me, and quite often I talk too fast, and quite often I do shift into the wrong gear and I speak like an attorney, which I shouldn't do when I'm not talking to attorneys. And so if there's a misunderstanding, it's my fault. I'll readily admit that it is my fault. It is my fault. So if somebody says, "Hey, Steve, you said this. Do you understand it can be taken two ways?" I look at it and go, "Oh, you're right. I hadn't thought of that. I'm sorry, I missed that." So I don't know. Mr. Bob Newell, do you have a pilot's license? No, I do not. I know several pilots. My brother's a pilot, but I am not a pilot. Jerry Dodge says, trivia, there are more airplanes in the ocean than there are submarines in the sky. Of course, both of those things go to the ocean to die, or at least they go to the water. So blah 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 says, what do you mean by that? Fred Blower says, I am the one that recommended the great movie Sisu to Steve. I'm not sure about that because in the Finnish community, there are a lot of people who are aware of the movie long before it was released in America. So Carl's Corner, to use the Queen's English or USA English? Well, now it's the King's English. But I will defer to the Oxford English Dictionary, although many people say that that is skewed towards English as opposed to American English. But I've got a collection of dictionaries. I probably have 50 or 60 or more. I got many dictionaries, and it's usually the dictionaries tend to agree with each other. Once in a while, you'll see something weird where it's like, oh, this uh, meaning is more so, and the dictionaries will often say, especially in America or especially in England or something. So, Mr. Bob Newell, have you seen the movie Sovereign? Yes, I have. It's streaming right now. It's been in the theaters. I think it had a brief theater release. It's a Nick Offerman movie where he plays a sovereign citizen. It's based on a true story. I thought it was very well done. I enjoyed it a lot. J, whose initials are also JJ. What audio mixer do you use? I'm not using an audio mixer. I never have. I run the camera. Yeah, see, in my language, I use this as a camera. That's a microphone. I run the microphone, this one, straight into my computer. It's got a Shure connection in the back. The electro voice there is run straight into the camera. And so there's no mixing, no compression, no any of that. So it's just a good microphone. You can call me Al. Do you know about Simo Heha? Yeah, he's one of my heroes. Simo Heha was a sniper during World War II, defending Finland against the Russians, doing quite a good job of it. And he lived quite a long life. I'm trying to remember what year he passed away. Someone can call it up. But yeah, Padres, the sovereign citizen, is an oxymoron. We have to understand, though, that that was a term that some people use to describe themselves by saying, I consider myself an American, but I control my own destiny. Therefore, I'm a sovereign. And they weren't saying like, white, black. They were saying like almost like one was an adjective and the other was a noun, but they weren't contradictory in that sense. Steve G, I love old dictionaries. English is so dynamic. Oh yeah, you look up words like hootenanny or brouhaha, and you often get better definitions if you go back about 100 years. Oh, you can call me Al Simoheha. The White Death is one of the most famous Finnish people that I know of. Yeah, the Finns tend to be kind of quiet, and for famous Finns, there have been a few. The composer Sibelius, for instance, although his name doesn't sound Finnish. Alethea, you were saying about horses the other day. Do you horseback ride? It's been a while. I actually saw some horses yesterday. I was visiting somebody and they had horses out back. I'm like, you got horses? But I haven't ridden a horse probably since I was 20 or 21, maybe right around there. It's been a while. Andrew Kruchowski says the captured 1895 Mosin Nagant. Yeah, he was using a gun with iron sights. He was not using a scope. He'd put on white, crawl in the snow into position before sunup, and sit there motionless for a few hours until a target came along. And then he'd move and do it again. And it got the point that they would call in airstrikes and artillery strikes on places they thought he might be. Jerry Dodge says the Oxford Dictionary recently added the word butt dial. I wouldn't be surprised. But that's the thing, is that a lot of people do get upset when slang makes it into a dictionary. But you have to understand that the dictionary is designed so that if you encounter a word that's not just invented on the spot at that moment in time, that you can find out what the definition of it is. And so, and possibly the word origin, because the OED will often give word origins also. And if a word gets used a lot, they're kind of forced to do it. So, Witness Multi-Chick says they added yeet. Yeet? They did? How about on fleek? Although I guess that would be two words. That'd be a phrase. Skylar Perone, did you see the Judge Fleischer decide to stop going live because a lawyer accused him of acting up for the camera? I saw that episode where that happened, and it's sad because I personally think that courtrooms should all be streamed, but be streamed in a manner set up by the court administrator, who might be answering to a chief judge. But my point is that you can walk in off the street and watch a courtroom. Like that's a public space for the most part. And so you should be allowed to log on and watch court. You should. But I know there are some judges who appear to enjoy being on camera, and some have gotten quite famous. Yeah, blah 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 reminds us that older people would tell us, if you don't know how to spell it, look it up in the dictionary. Well, how can I find it if you don't know how to spell it? Usually because you can get close and start narrowing it in, you know. KKC says the dictionary in Australia has use, as in use guys, or what? Yeah, you can call me Al points out that Simo Heha was shot in the face with an exploding bullet and pretty much brushed it off, went back to work. I think he did get laid up for a little while, but it's like Granny on the Beverly Hillbillies. She falls off a tree from 30 feet, and that could lay you up for an afternoon. So Tim Nossum, the best response to "I'm not driving, I'm traveling." The officer responded, "Well, now you're traveling to jail." Yeah, witness multi-chick points out that eat means to throw something or toss something. And I've never used it in a sentence on purpose. So, yeah, Mighty Mouse points out the dictionary is a simple log of English words and how they've been used. It's not a manual on how to speak. Proper English is defined by how we speak and understand it. And that's the thing. And I know people who are upset that slang is in the dictionary and even insults. And it'll say non-standard or offensive and it'll say that, but you know, you can call me Al says I completely agree with streaming every single court case and trial. Aletheus says, I've been to the Old Bailey a few times to watch some trials. Super interesting. You know, I was in London last fall and I walked by a bunch of courts right there on Fleet Street. Not Fleet Street, but Fleet Street. And I was tempted to go in and watch something, but I know the odds of catching an interesting trial are pretty slim. So, Andy New York 29 says Scotty Scheffler wins the British Open. Yeah, Andreas Lindholm says dictionary and grammar are two different things. Yes. And by the way, and this is one of the things that really bugs me, but I'll admit it bugs me and it shouldn't. But people will routinely correct my language in videos. And they'll say, hey, Steve, you said this. And the weird thing is that if you don't have a script in front of you that I've gotten to edit, a lot of people miss, like, for instance, punctuation that could be there and so on. But also, it's not uncommon to start a sentence and change your mind and then go off in a different direction. And I'm not going to stop and redo the whole sentence and then put a big slice in there. I'd rather just keep talking as most people understand it. KKC, a use is plural of you. Well, yeah, and I've often heard, okay, but in America, you'll hear people say use guys, which would be plural. So the prodigal stranger says I was in London back in February, spent 10 hours in Terminal 5 at Heathrow. Art S says famous Finns. Yeah, Steve Lehto. 858 Bill says I quit playing Scrabble in disgust after I was denied the word quo, as in status quo. But did they deny it because it's Latin as opposed to English? Oh, Skylar Perone says they could, of course, stream it on the court's website because that wouldn't make you famous, so people really wouldn't be chasing the fame. Now, I get that also. I think a lot of places will put it up on YouTube simply because it's easier for their tech departments. Trust me. So, some of these courthouses are still using computers with a green screen and the blinking cursor of death. Knock Knock 1975 points out that we should all pivot at this point in time. Pivot. Yeah, Skylar Perone says it should be accessible if you want it, but I don't like having it on something like YouTube. Well, the problem with YouTube also, it is a financial, platform. It's being run by a commercial entity. And so that implies that somebody's making money off of it. Who, I don't know. So Fatty Butterpants points out, and I wish I'd thought of this. A hunting license to run in a state park is a slippery slope, but it started when the Beastie Boys needed a license to ill. And you better party because remember, the Beastie Boys fought for that right. Yeah. Standard deviation says that is why you are obligated to be absolutely correct on everything. I always point out to people, I say, look, if it upsets you this much, stop watching. They're like, well, you're the one who's putting up videos. I'm not putting them up for you. I don't. Did I put something to your head and say you got to watch this? Fly Chomper Fly says I went to look up we could have went to correct someone and was shocked that it's now considered acceptable. By whom? Who considers it acceptable? Because could have gone would be more correct. And yes, things can be more or less correct. Oh boy. Andrew Kuchowski says he had a 7 Mosin Nagants in his time, had 7 of them. An 1898 Imperial, a PU sniper, a long barrels, Soviet 2 carbines, a cavalry mid barrel, and a Finnish capture. The Finnish had a wonderful stock. I actually knew a guy who built up a museum for the Winter War with an amazing collection of everything, including a bunch of what you just described. But he also had medals and uniforms, and he donated it to the Finnish American Heritage Center that's in northern Michigan. If you ever get a chance to go up there, drop in and check it out if you're a World War II person. Writer dude, who uses a 3 for an R. English is a continuously evolving language. What was slang yesterday is proper today. Yeah, in many respects, English is like a dumpster of a language because so much stuff gets tossed into it from other languages, other cultures, and yeah, it is constantly changing. I'm fascinated by reading stuff written by people in the 17 and 1800s who clearly are more literate than the average person is today. And yet many of them have nothing but an elementary or grammar school education. So Boomer says in Utah, a wildlife management area is not a state park. Many people are confused. Yeah, no, I mentioned that in the article that the thing that required the pass or the permit or license was a wildlife management area, but obviously a parallel to a state park, and I simply mention it because in Michigan we don't have, I believe, any wildlife management areas. We've got state parks, and I know that to get into a state park with an automobile, you've got to have the sticker or pay for a sticker. So there is some money being paid, but obviously, if you're hunting in there, you'd need to pay for the sticker and a hunting license and so on. So Steve G, how would I know how bad the movie is if I walk out before it's over? Is that a reference to me saying you don't have to watch the videos? Because I've had people tell me that they've watched hundreds of my videos and they've hated them all. And I'm like, okay. Oh boy. Chris Gooley, read the Salem witch trial court proceedings for really strange old English. I bet you can find those on that famous trials website. There's a college professor who's got a famous trials website, and he's got pages on each of the famous trials, including the Salem witch trial. Yeah. Oh no. And people did speak strangely back then. Also, it wasn't just written, but they'll write these glorious letters to each other, and you're like, who writes like that? So angels don't fall, so they went intergalactic planetary. Planetary intergalactic after they got caught rhyming and stealing. I love that song too. Somebody gave me their greatest hits for my birthday a few years ago. And I remember listening to going, some of it I'm not too crazy about, but a lot of it is good. So yeah, Steve says those are the same people who return food after they ate it. That's a joke from Woody Allen also about the old couple arguing at the restaurant, going, "Oh my gosh, the food here is horrible, and the portions are so small." Oh, Belio, how about the way people misuse decimates? That came up a couple weeks ago. So we will move on. Mike Lackner, watching hundreds of videos you don't like is like being married 6 times. When, I hate to be critical of anybody, but the vows, you hear them at the 6th wedding ceremony, and you're like, really? Does anybody play Wordle? Yes, I do. I do. It's a good, kills 3-4 minutes a day. Mighty Mouse, I think you forget that some people troll the internet. No, no, I know that. I know that. And the weird part is that I try to, try to avoid the obvious trolling, but I've had somebody send me repeated emails, which I've ignored, saying, and in today's video, you said this, and then you said that, and they're clearly watching the videos and they're taking the time to send me an email. And I look at them piling up in my garbage, going, why do they keep doing that? Why? I don't know. Jerry, did Steve just do a Boston accent? Did I say something about throwing something out in my car? KKC says it could be interpreted as decimating that one soldier in 10 to nothing. No, but the word literally meant that there were centurions who were in groups of 100, hence the word century. And if they performed poorly in battle, and by the way, this is not only in Roman times, but other countries have done this. But in Roman times, if a centurion, a group of 100 men went into battle and they showed cowardice, instead of eliminating all of them because that'd be wasteful, they go, okay, we'll eliminate every 10th one. So that'll be a lesson to the 90 remaining people. Next time you go into battle, don't be such wimps. And decimate literally meant to reduce something by 10%. So it wouldn't be reduced to 10% because that'd be killing 90% of the men. And there's a famous movie called Paths to Glory, which was about French army in World War I. Now, it wasn't the same numbers, but the concept was the same. So I'm really pointing that out. MHO8, what's your starting word for Wordle? I've already had 3 of my starting words get used. So when I pull up my Wordle and it shows me what I've done, it goes, you've had 3 single guesses. On the first guess, you got it. I'm trying to remember what those were. One of them was Taken, Taken. And that I got that in one shot. Fatty McButterpants, will you be a pallbearer at my wedding? Blah, blah, blah. Is quarterly 4 or 25? Oh, what's better is bi-weekly. Is it every 2 weeks or twice a week? And there are some that can mean both, and you just better know. So, Anthony Valley or Wally. Oh my God, the food is horrible. Portions are so small. KKC, mine is media. I wanted a lot of vowels. Yeah, and so I mean, if you watched Wheel of Fortune, that some letters are more common than others. So you try to start with a bunch of them if you can, but then they know you're going to do that. And once in a while, they'll have some weird word, So Roxanne's checking in. Hi, Steve and chat. MHO8 says he starts with quite because he wants to see there's a Q in there. But I'm going to go straight. I'm going to go straight to the fluids. It is in fact 2:00. Opinion Rat, have you been through the desert on a horse with no name? No, I have not. In fact, like I said before, I haven't ridden a horse in a long time, and it was not in a desert. But the horses all had names. But sadly, they were the names that we gave them, humans. And you never know if that's actually what the horses call each other. These are things I think about. Spaghetti Man, I used to play Words with friends, but one day I played against someone who was pulling $10 words out of their ass when I realized that people cheat. Yeah, that's sad that people would cheat like that. I actually know somebody who got ahead, got along very, very well in a company that she was at because at a company meeting of some sort, she was talking to the guy who owned the company, and he mentioned he loves playing Words with friends, and she was quite good at it. And she said that she was often playing the boss, the guy who owned the company. And it probably helped a lot because later on he'd bump it. Oh, and he'd remember her and, they chit chatted and so on. The camera state, thanks for your work. I love the knowledge and get Justia drops as well. Angels Don't Fall wants to know if Y is a vowel. Most people would consider it a vowel, yes. But are you saying that there's something else going on with that emoticon? Daniel Kester, what happened to Diet Coke Lady from before you took a break from live streaming? Diet Coke Lady? David Peterson, Tom Mix's horse was named Tony. I love when people give animals either very, very creative names or such non-traditional names. A horse named Tony. My brother had an octopus in his aquarium named Lefty, which is a pretty good name. Angels Don't Fall says that I, as a matter of fact, have been through the desert on a horse with no name, literally. Okay. Um, yeah, Fast Eddie 333 says the biggest thing with words with friends, and this is also true with Scrabble, is to know acceptable two-letter words. Andrews Lindholm, nice mug. I assume you're referring to the mug, which just coincidentally matches the shirt, sort of. It's as close as we can get. Chris Fitz points that out too. STP World, what happened to the Simpsons toys? It used to be on your shelf. There is still a boxed Homer Simpson. I think it's Homer Simpson. Or is it Lionel Hutz? I've got one of each. I've got one that's actually nailed to the wall, but it's on the left. It's partially off camera, but it is partially on camera at all times. Chris Fitz says that's a cup, not a mug. Technically speaking, yes. Yes. David Phillips says, yeah, Mr. Ed and Wilbur. Oh, Angels Don't Fall. I had a piranha I named Chomper. Just one or several? Jerry Dodge, an octopus named Lefty. Yes, that's what you heard. And yeah, octopus are very, very smart animals. Plural is not octopi, it's octopuses, because octopus is not Latin, it is Greek. And I learned that from reading the goofs on IMDb about one of the James Bond movies. And oddly enough, it wasn't Octopussy. Oh, Chris Better, my neighbor had a cat named Gary. Andreas, never heard of anyone having an octopus in the aquarium. No, my brother had an octopus. He had a couple eels, big eels, a Tessalandra eel, which was spotted like a giraffe. Really cool. I seem to recall that he had to have something that he could put the octopus in because there were other things in the tank that might eat it. But he had it for a while. Yeah, Padre, I knew someone with a dog named Diogi. I've known several people with dogs named Diogi, spelled out D-O-G, but they spell it D-I-O-G-E-E or something like that, Diogi. But yeah, that's been done. Fatty Butterpants, Robert E. Lee's horse was named Traveler. I think I knew that at one point in time, but I'll admit I'd forgotten it. Belio, I used to have a cat with no name. Richard Terhune, I've got a Boston Terrier named Gary. Jerry Dodge, my dad's old dog, was D-O-G. Rest in peace to them both. The camera states, what do you think of getting a permanent injunction for speaking a government employee's name in city council? You mean where you walk up to city council to make a statement at the podium during like public speaking time and you simply say someone's name? That would seem like a pretty difficult thing to enforce, but if there's an injunction, obviously you got to fight the injunction. The question is it relevant? In other words, you're not just doxing somebody or calling out somebody's name who normally would be secret. I can't imagine. I'd have to know more facts about it. but that certainly does seem to be a head scratcher, as we like to say. Airplane mechanic Arnold Ziffel was the name of the pig. Ironically, often played by a female pig, but Arnold Ziffel is one of the funniest jokes on that show. I loved Green Acres. And Arnold Ziffel will walk into the room, turn on the TV, and it's always the exact same show. And it's a Western with cowboys and Indians running across the screen making all kinds of noise. And it's a joke about everything because he can turn the TV on. He sits in a chair and watches the TV. He understands English perfectly well, and he can speak to other people, but Mr. Douglas doesn't know what he's saying, but everyone else does. At one point in time, he goes to Hollywood to be in the movies. Another time he went, I think, to Chicago because he may have been heir to a fortune. And it's just a comical thing because the Ziffels treat Arnold like he's their son, and people keep trying to explain to the Ziffels that no, he's a pig, and they're like, and of course, it's all part of the weird thing that Oliver Douglas is in, where he can't quite wrap his head around what's happening out there in Hooterville or Hoosterville, as his wife might say. Oh, David Phillips, Arnold Ziffel. Yeah, Padre points out that Lassie was played by male dogs. Yeah, and with a collie, that's probably a little less obvious. But don't forget, there was a time when you could have an entire show based around a dog and its adventures. And oh no, Timmy's falling down the well again. Okay. Someone needs to talk to Timmy about that well and the dangers of falling down it. You can call me Al, called his Pomeranian Harry because I'm sorry, named Potter because he was in fact Harry. Yeah, Buck Rogers, don't forget Rin Tin Tin was actually a huge star in old Hollywood. Michael Hoyland says the Frazier dog is actually several dogs over the seasons. I know for the longest time, Eddie was played by a dog named Moose. I'm not sure about other dogs, though, because but have to see. Standard deviation Flipper was played by several dolphins, only one of which could do the famous tail walk. KKC, not little Timmy's fault. Who was the owner who left it uncovered and children play nearby? It is an attractive nuisance, but that kid keeps falling down. That should put you on notice that it's dangerous. So I guess you're right. MHOA, but isn't the property owner liable for that well? Unless it's on their property. Timmy's parents might own the property. I'm not sure. Mitch MC says he can cock and shoot his Daisy BB gun like the rifleman still can. Johan Orozco, shouldn't we all be in church right now? No, we should have been in church hours ago. We don't spend the whole day in church. What do you think this is? The Plymouth and the Pilgrims? Mark Keppel says, I think this live gives me more useless knowledge and I love it. That's the whole point. Useless knowledge. Jam it in your head. Mark Miller, an attractive nuisance like a swimming pool. An attractive nuisance is a legal thing. And if you study torts, which is wrongs for which you can sue to get recovery that are non-contractual, look it up. There are things that are considered to be an attractive nuisance, which you have to protect against people coming over and messing with them or getting hurt. Construction sites are at the top of the list. So when you see a construction site go up, you'll almost immediately see the fence go up around it. Otherwise, kids will go play there and get hurt. And you can't say, well, they should have read the sign that said, stay away. Kids will be kids. Put up a fence. And so swimming pool likewise. But the most common one you hear is the construction site. Francis Chartrand says they also did the well on Little House on the Prairie. Did somebody fall down the well? There are actually, it's interesting. I mean, there have been stories of kids falling down wells fairly recently. Some have made national news and stuff. But there was a time when wells were just simply holes in the ground, and people making them may or may not have put a lot of thought into how carefully they were guarded or protected or anything like that. So Robert Dillon says it was Timmy. Timmy fell down the well. Of course he did. Dan Boyd says I prefer a lemon tort. Yeah, because of course a tort can also be a pastry of some sort. Yeah, Padre, baby Jessica. I was trying to remember her name. That was a crazy one about how long she was down there, what they had to go through to get her out. Oh, Bob blah blah says the little boy wasn't in the well; he was hiding aloft the barn. You're talking about Balloon Boy, the guy who the family that was involved in a balloon that took off, and there was some allegations. There may have been some chicanery there too. Robert Sherman. Hey, Steve. Hey, Robert. How are you, man? Perishable Goods 13. Jessica McClure. You can call me Al says many of the best places to skateboard. In fact, you have no skateboarding signs, which makes them more attractive. But there are skate parks now. What I'm really curious about is when a city puts up a skate park and a kid goes there and breaks their arm. Do the parents sue? I'm sure there's signs all over the place. Use at your own risk. But it's like, who thought I was going to break my arm there? This is a city park. Witness multi chick likes coffee. MH08, Balloon Boy, before TikTok was a thing. Yeah, and Robert Dillon wasn't John Travolta the Balloon Boy. No, he was the Bubble Boy. Bubble Boy. Yeah, Belio, Balloon Boy is not to be confused with Bubble Boy. Oh, Cyberdoc, who pushed Timmy? See, now it's a conspiracy. Oh. You can call me Al says usually you have to sign a waiver before you're allowed to skateboard there. I've seen some skate parks that appear to be unattended. Like there's just anybody can walk up and do them. Hey, where's Heather? Fatty Butterpants asks. I suspect she's working because she will show up if she can. Jim Domaradsky, a naked lady, ran out of her house calling for her cat. And that's a free show. Brad M73 says Timmy never once fell down a well. Guy's got a reputation he doesn't deserve, I guess. Lassie could have pushed Timmy down the well, says G Keyman 565. Opinion Rat, best episode of The Simpsons, Bart's walkie-talkie in the well. Yeah, of course, and they did put together a super group to raise money by putting together a song where they're sending their love down the well. I just saw that one about 2 weeks ago. Terrell Cochran says we have a skate park here that is used at your own risk, put in by the city. Mark Keppel, been a great session, but I got to go. Hope you all have a great week. You too, my friend. Roxin, Bubble Boy had immune disorder. I believe that is the argument. Yes. And he was beating George at Trivial Pursuit. And they got an argument over a typographical error, which, by the way, was a real thing on Trivial Pursuit cards. There were some where they printed the wrong answers to the questions, and like mint, like a mint error, but they were funny. So Zafar said, "Why didn't the wells come with an escape ladder?" Probably because most people would think that that's also an ingress ladder. But number two, many of the wells were so small they didn't think a person could fit down them. Like where the little girl, baby Jessica, fell in, it was so small. It's surprising that she got in there. So Mrs. Teresa, 1999, Littlest Hobo was Canada's version of Lassie. Oren 10101, Littlest Hobo. Yeah, I've rings a very, very faint bell. But that's the thing about a lot of like children's stories in other countries. They may not translate as well. Yes, Belia points out the card says moops. The card says moops. Randy Veneer, happy Sunday, Steve. And to you, my friend. Chris Tope, have you ever seen The Littlest Hobo? It's Canadian, but the dog travels the country finding adventures. No, I have not. Now, I will tell you that there was a story, and one may have inspired the other, but I remember seeing a story in Life magazine, and I'm guessing from the 40s or 50s, that there was a dog that was like kind of adopted by the railroad, and he spent time on trains and would occasionally jump off at one place and hang around for a while and jump on and show. And it turns out all the train people, these are freight trains, all the train people knew who he was and took care of him. And I remember seeing a Life story about him. It's been a while. I'm trying to remember. I bought that Life magazine for something else, so it probably has something else in it of interest to something I've written. But there you go. Alethea has in fact seen The Littlest Hobo. I'm going to check that out. KKC says, I work on trains. We still have animals like that, usually cats, but there is one goat. Does the goat ever get on the train and travel that way also, though? Wife's calling. Matthias has got to go. Enjoy yourself, my friend, and I will watch my P.O. box for you. Buck Rogers, is Life magazine still around? No. The story is from decades ago. Oh, yes, you can call me Al, the Japanese dog that waited for his owner who tragically died, and he would go and wait for his owner at the train platform, continuing to wait for him. Unbelievable. FL Clutch, qualified immunity coming to ballot in Ohio. Any predictions? I hope they get the word out. Oh, Brad M73. I seem to recall The Littlest Hobo being on Nickelodeon back in the 80s. So I was a little bit too old for that, but they did play more Canadian and British content back then. Nacho Bro Ryan says the goat is the best ever train hopper. He is the goat of all train hoppers, correct? Oh, the goat doesn't get on the train. He just hangs around and watches us go by. Okay. Fred Blowers, check out the movie Red Dog. Red Dog took place in Australia. I've not heard of that. If I remember, I'll check it out. Yeah, David Phillips reminds us the goats do yoga. They're not actually doing yoga; they're participating with the people doing yoga, and people seem to enjoy that. So, Rob Windsor is in Wald, Germany, on vacation. Normally checking in from Colorado. Thank you, my friend, for checking in. What like 9, 10 o'clock at night right now. That's crazy. Dan Boyd Nipper still knew his master's voice and the phonograph spun at the wrong speed. That's one which a lot of younger people won't even know, but there's the famous uh, advertisement where there's the horn of a Victrola and a dog has got his ear cocked. And he's listening for his master's voice. And the dog's name was, in fact, Nipper. Nipper. Mark Miller, pre-cable, could you pick up Canadian TV? Yes. Yes. I lived in a suburb of Detroit, and we got Windsor Television and Windsor Radio. We listened to CKLW, the Big Eight, one of the top 40 stations in North America. They were a clear channel station, but we got them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they were playing great music, but also Channel 9 out of Windsor. And I can tell you right now that I used to watch hockey on Channel 9 because the announcers were better. So there were a couple of times where Detroit made the playoffs, and I had a choice between watching it on Canadian television or American television, and I'd watch it on Canadian TV. Randy Veneer, I'm from Sioux, Ontario, would watch TV out of Detroit. Remember the Ghoul? Oh, yeah. Yeah, the Ghoul. It's interesting because a lot of local markets had people like the Ghoul. And the Ghoul started out assisting another guy. I don't know if it's Sven Gulli or not, but one of those type of guys. And then he had the opportunity to do his own show and started doing his own show, but he made it his own. So people remember because he was in Detroit on like Channel 50, then I think Channel 20. He may have gone to Toledo at one point in time. So MH08, yep, we got CKLW in Minnesota. They got CKLW everywhere. I mean, yeah, that signal carried. Brett, 7284, good afternoon from West Bloomfield. West Bloomfield. Jim Naden listens to CKLW on occasion down here in Middle Indiana. I'm not sure what year they changed, but CKLW was huge in the 60s. They're a top 40 station. They often broke songs, meaning they were the first to play a song that would become a hit. If they played a song that wasn't a hit, it became a hit. They had really, really good taste in music. There's a woman named Rosie who was behind their music selections, a lot of it during that time. Some of the best disc jockeys in North America worked there. It was an amazing station. But as FM came in, they became less and less relevant because people started listening to FM, and CKLW as an AM station kind of went along the wayside. They've changed formats a bunch of times. I know that AM 800 is still on the air, but not the last time they appeared in the ratings books was probably 20, 30 years ago, if that. So DePaul used to hear CKLW at night in New York City. KKC, a bit late, but good morning from Sydney, Australia. Thank you for checking in, my friend. KC Jimmy, networks may give up the late night slots, and it could be possible return of offbeat local programming. That's an interesting question. Some of you may have heard that Stephen Colbert, Late Show, CBS is just literally shutting it down and pulling the plug on it next year. And, they say they're doing it because the cost. And by the way, the cost of those shows is ridiculous. They have a staff of like 50 people making a lot of money. And nowadays, that kind of expensive programming is disappearing. So Francis Chartrand could be received for almost 1,000 miles in the right weather, well into the 80s with Dick Purton. What year? Because I think Dick Purton left CKLW, went to was WOMC next? Or did he go to one of the other stations first? I'm trying to remember. But Randall Thrift, do you have a most memorable moment as a DJ? I've got a lot of memories of being a DJ. A lot of them are good, a lot of them are bad. I'm not sure most memorable would be when I get together and talk about these things with other disc jockeys. You always talk about things like, where, something malfunctioned or the wrong thing went out over the air. Never anything major like that, but I'd have to think about it. Steve, I wonder how much money Leno and Letterman made for the respective companies. Oh, 20 years ago, those shows were huge money makers. And what's happened over time is the spending on advertising on network television has gone down. And most local TV stations now make the bulk of their money off of their local news programming because they can sell it locally. But a lot of those stations, all you got to do is look at who's on the air. And it looks like they're getting kids right out of broadcast school who are like 18 years old doing the weather and the news. But yeah, no, back in the day, they made boatloads of money. But a lot of media has changed. I can tell you right now that famous disc jockeys, for instance, in Detroit, many of them disappeared not because they were fired, but because they were told if you want to stay, you're getting a pay cut. And some of them just said, I'm not taking a pay cut. And they're like, fine, go. And they just replace them with something else. But I suspect that those shows that are being canceled could survive if they said, hey, we're willing to cut 3/4 of our staff and make the show much lower budget. But they don't want to do that. It would be a huge step backwards if you've been doing it this way all along. Angels Don't Fall. What about Letterman's morning show? Yeah. David Letterman had a morning show for a while. The network liked him. They thought he was talented. They thought he should have a talk show. But they weren't quite sure what to do with him, so they gave him a show that ran at like 10 o'clock in the morning or something. I never saw it. I've seen clips of it later, but I never saw it at the time. And then when they shifted him to late night was when I think it was around the time that I was living in Bad Axe, early 80s. And I remember watching him going, this guy is brilliant, like what he was doing on television. And but he had a long run, but obviously he's gone now. He's retired at least. You remember Phil Donahue? Marius 28991. Have you driven any BMW M series? I've never driven a BMW. I've got a friend who's got an electric BMW, but I've never driven it. I've ridden in it. Robert Dillon says, I think the Letterman morning show is the summer of 78. It'd be right around there because, like I said, he went to the late night, I think in 81 or 82, right? Jim Naden says Letterman got fired from a little radio station near me in Elwood, Indiana. I know that he used to go on the air and say all kinds of goofy stuff. And I do believe at one point in time in a weather forecast, he said there might be hail the size of canned hams. And he thought it was funny, but other people didn't. Dan Boyd, Phil Donahue got to start in Dayton, Ohio. I knew he started someplace in the Midwest. KC Jimmy, the 1835 demo, is not tuning into network broadcasts. They're stream watchers. You know, there is very little on television where I'll actually say, I got to watch that live. Sports, that's it. I will watch a football game live because to me, it's more fun that way. But if there's a show on TV tonight, DVR, I'll watch it later and I'll zap the commercials. So it's going to keep going that way. So Jerry Dodge, don't forget about the movie and the book Where the Red Fern Grows. Lewis Browning, the Chevy Chase show killed late night. Don't forget the Magic Hour with Magic Johnson. I mean, there were a bunch of flop shows. Joan Rivers had a show. David Brenner had a show. I mean, there were a bunch of these shows that were just a year or two and just, Dialing for Dollars. Ram 50 V8 mid-afternoon TV program. Yeah, and also Bowling for Dollars. Belio says that, and I think I saw these numbers also. The Colbert Show costs about $120 million a year to make, and CBS only recouped about 100 of that, so they lose $20 million a year. So if they were to cut their budget by $20 million, they could break even. But with the way things are going, they have to cut it by more than that, and that would only be a break even. So Dan Boyd says TV is pretty much dead to me. Yeah, no, seriously. There's, I used to watch Fast and Loud with Richard Rawlings and Aaron Kaufman on one of the channels. I don't know what channel it is. Just cable on a Discovery, maybe. I don't know. And all of a sudden, I noticed he's just shooting videos on his own and posting them on YouTube. And they're just as good as a TV show. They're actually better because he's not being told by networks to do stupid stuff. And I watch those. And guess what? His production cost is a fraction of what the network was wasting, but it creates more profit for him. So I salute the guy for doing that. And we're going to see more and more of that coming. I wouldn't be surprised if Stephen Colbert winds up someplace else. I just don't know where else he'll show up. But I doubt that he'll only be out there. I doubt that he'll be out there on anything anywhere near as expensive to produce as what he was coming from. So Steve says, don't forget the Pat Sajak show. Sig 226 says the Chevy Chase show only lasted 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Okay, that's pretty bad. Robert Dillon, Craig Ferguson is hilarious. And I got the impression that his show didn't quite cost as much as Stephen Colbert's show to produce. Craig Ferguson was quite funny. I've seen quite a bit of his stuff. It's very, very funny. Lost in Space asks a question. Why would a show that insults half its potential audience nightly make money? The thinking is the other half of the audience will make them money. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And that's the economy speaking. That's economics and capitalism happening. Sean M, there's too many TV channels today. I go to the listing, and I've got it's technically not cable, but I've got something I pay for, and I go to the listing, and there's like 9,000 channels. And if you said, Steve, you can eliminate the channels you'll never use, and you'll save a penny per channel. I can make them pay me to watch because there's dozens and dozens and dozens of channels. I've never watched them once. I never will watch them once, but they're there. So Fast and Loud, according to Mitch MC, is an ATC antenna TV in the Twin Cities channel KAR11. Oh, really? Okay. Okay. I mean, and are these the earlier ones that were produced or the ones that are being shot by the guys themselves? I'm curious now. Aaron's late to the show, but is in fact here now. Mark Miller says less than 90 days until hockey season. Oh boy. You can call me else. Me TV has a lot of the good stuff. Yeah. Me TV and Cozy TV, which are right near each other on my system. And I watch a lot of those shows. Although, like, they've got MASH on for like a 2-hour block. I think it's Me TV, but I confused the two. And after you've gone through the whole series once, it takes a while because after the first season, to me it starts getting a little off. So, Art S says Colbert's staff is in fact 200 people. I wonder if he knows all their names, but he's probably got a staff of producers who sit around and write things for him and do research for him, and then he's got managers who review what they do. And so, Fatima Butterpants, I watch Lehto on Sundays, the only show I can afford. Hey, the price is right? Angels Don't Fall. We had 3 channels. There might be 4 now. When I was growing up, we had channel 2, which at the time was CBS. 4 was WDIV, NBC out of Detroit. 7 was ABC affiliate, Action News. And then, of course, we had 9, which was Canadian television. And then we had 20, which was WXON, which always stumbled on the edge of being functional. We had 50, which is WKBD, Kaiser Broadcasting, WKBD. They are the ones who ran Gilligan's Island and the Three Stooges and all the important stuff after school. And then we had 56, which is PBS. And those are the primary channels. But later on, 62 signed on. and I forgot what the city of license is, someplace over towards Mount Clemens. And Fox talked WJBK Channel 2 into switching from CBS to Fox. And briefly, Detroit did not have a CBS affiliate. So at that point, they talked Channel 62 into becoming a CBS affiliate. And then WXON has toyed with the idea about going pay, where you got to like actually pay to watch them and get a special receiver of some sort. And a little while later, it would stop. But yeah, I'm not even sure they're on the air right now. So Francis Chartrand 50 was great. Had a lot of the local sports. John Michael Carmichael could get 11 in Detroit. Channel 11? What was that? Never heard of Channel 11. Steve says if someone lived in between Detroit and Toledo, they could probably pick up both. Probably. Probably. Lewis Browning, I want my MTV. Francis Chartrand, CTV, Canadian television. Isn't that a network? Because of course CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcast Corporation or company. Yeah, Jim's camera done. I want my MTV that actually played music. Yeah, and would that last? It only lasted like 5 years or so, but Padre says they had a reboot of Married with Children scheduled, but now it's been canceled. I was not aware of that. Scott Summers does his a channel 11 out of Alpena, but I doubt that would reach Toledo. In New York, channel 11 was WPIX Independent. Oh, KKC says it'd be great to have lived between two cities that are in different time zones because you might be able to miss a show in one time zone but catch it in the other. Interesting. The Prodigal Stranger says never watch a remake. You watch the original because if the original was bad, they wouldn't remake it. But you have to understand, I read a fascinating article that Married with Children was a huge hit in Russia, but they remade it for the Russian audience. And so they actually, the people who owned the rights to Married with Children actually sold the rights to a production company in Russia. And they took the scripts, they cast all the characters, and then they rewrote them so the jokes would work in Russian. And apparently, it was a huge phenomenon over there. But it's been a while since I read about it, but it was a fascinating story. Robert Dillon says I worked for CNN in Atlanta in the mid 80s, and in the copy room, they had all the stationery they had pulled from the Beirut office after the Marine barracks explosion. Wow, that's a blast from the past. A bunch of different stories they're blended together. Wow. David Peterson, there's a period in the 70s that WHO television, Des Moines, had a blooper reel of news mishaps, including studio lights falling during the weather. Wow. And remember back in the old days, that stuff might be captured on camera, but wouldn't be picked up by people at home who didn't have VCRs yet. But nowadays, all that stuff is caught by somebody. Oh, I am McNathan. Growing up in Ann Arbor back in the 60s and 70s, we could watch WTOL Channel 11 as well as the Detroit stations. Okay, because yes, Ann Arbor is kind of west of Detroit, but it's south a bit too. So Belio, I was in France many years ago and watched the Mary Tyler Moore show dubbed into German. Bizarre. That sounds like it. Oh. Ella Thea says, I've spent quite a bit of time in Germany. It's fun to watch their dubbed over TV shows and movies. I was just joking with somebody recently about overdubbed movies. And what's funny about this is there's a movie called Das Boot or Das Boot, if you want to mispronounce it. And don't correct me unless you're German. And the movie was shot in Germany, in German. And they decided after it had done very, very well, released as a foreign film in German, they overdubbed it into English. And I went and saw it again, and I'm like, whoa, they did such a good job that if you weren't told it had been overdubbed, you might not catch it. It's that good. So if you like World War II movies and haven't seen Das Boot, see it. There is an overdubbed version that is just as watchable, if not more so, than the subtitled version. So Andrew Kruchowski says they did do a good job with the dub. Jim's Camera at Dawn. I've got Das Boot on VHS. Yeah, but is it subtitled or is it in English or do you have both? Ram 50 V8 classic show growing up. Love American style. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I remember watching it in the afternoons. I don't know if that was when it ran originally or was being rerun or something, but Andrew Kuchowski says the director's cut really adds the tension with the depth charging. Lost in Space, all submarine movies are good. To varying degrees, yes. Isaac Bob York watched it, but it had Swedish subtitles. But watch it overdubbed into English, and it'll help you practice your English. And Patrick Mulcahy says, and I meant to mention this earlier, but I got distracted. Sisu 2 is coming out in November. Sisu 2. They just can't leave that guy alone. Tigerman 99515 did something like 50% not return. 80% didn't return. 20%. It's one of the lowest survival rates of like all time of any branch of any service ever anywhere. Unless you really start going back to ancient times or something like that. You Can Call Me Alice. Sean Connery is amazing in The Hunt for Red October. I actually love that movie. I love that movie. I know people who don't care for it, or they think it's a little bit over the top or something. I think it's a perfectly made movie. It's paced perfectly. It's acted well. There are a couple little tiny problems with it, but other than that, it's such a good movie. I was always kind of turned off by the weird name. I remember at the time going, "The Hunt for Red October." What's that about? We're gonna go out and hunt. What are you hunting? It's a submarine. Okay, so you can call me else. I'm going to start an argument by saying Sean Connery is the best James Bond. I know people who think that, but I actually like Daniel Craig. I actually like Daniel Craig, but the Daniel Craig movies are different in the sense that to me the plots make more sense, and Daniel Craig comes across as more human. You never saw James Bond actually get hurt. Somehow he's beating people up. He's wearing a suit. Daniel Craig looks human, and still does quite well. Belio, Das Boat, Chicago Museum of Science and Industry went through the U505. I've been on that myself. It is amazing to walk through it and see how cramped it was. And it's an interesting experience to see that. Jerry Dodge says Pierce Brosnan. I think Pierce Brosnan did pretty well also. Mindbend, no, I did not read the book The Hunt for Red October. I've never read a Tom Clancy book. Prodigal Stranger, Andre, you've lost another submarine? You got to see the movie to get the joke. Andy New York 29 says the book was way better than the movie. Wow. Okay. Opinion Rat says I learned from a Hunt for October that one should do a crazy Ivan once in a while. Yes, and don't always go the same direction. It shouldn't be predictable. Tiger Man, what's the history of the U-505? It was captured during World War II. And after the war was over, they're like, well, what are we going to do with this thing? Somebody goes, well, maybe a museum in Chicago would like it. So they brought it to Chicago. And for a while, it was actually outdoors. And I think they built a building around it. It's huge in that sense. Once you're inside, it seems small. But Randall Thrift, Sean Connery was a great actor. Oh, he was a great actor. He's a great actor. It's just interesting in the sense that you actually have a recurring character like James Bond, who's been played by like 7 different people, some more than others, and you can actually discuss who played the role better. And to me, like I said, it's a little difficult because I think the movies have changed. I think the quality of the screenplays have gotten better. But the funny part is, no one agrees with me because I liked Quantum of Solace. And whenever I see a listing of all James Bond movies ranked from worst to best, Quantum of Solace is always near the worst end. And I'm like, it's one of my favorite movies. Love that movie. Mike Lackner says, I must confess, I'm working on my camper as I listen, but I bought it used years ago. So I'm not a heretic. Well, you can buy used campers, know what you're getting yourself into. But yeah. Glad you're here, my friend. Appreciate that. Andy New York 29, when I first read The Hunt for Red October, I literally couldn't put the book down. Did they change the plot much, though? I'm curious about that. Because, like, for instance, I mentioned before The Prestige, the movie The Prestige, one of my favorite movies of all time. I love that movie. I've seen that movie more times than I could ever estimate. But I also read the book. I read the book before I saw the movie. In fact, I read the book long before the movie got made. And the book was really good too. And they're very, very different. But they're both good in how they're done. And I actually was looking into this. I was fascinated by this. And I found an interview with the guy whose name is Priest, I believe, who wrote The Prestige, best-selling book in England, and it sold quite well here too. And somebody said, "What did you think of the movie?" Because they sold the movie rights, and the movie got made. And he said he went and saw it twice, and he said to himself, "Why didn't I think of that?" So they changed it, but he liked it. But the interesting thing is that so it's a fascinating concept about how they take a story and turn it into a movie. Beep boop bop. Liam Neeson, Naked Gun. I saw a trailer for that yesterday, but in the trailer, he didn't speak. And so I'm not sure because I've got no problem with them remaking that movie or remaking that concept. And I got no problem with, I think Liam Neeson would be a guy who would be funny to have him doing the deadpan delivery. I need to see him. I need to hear him talk one time. Prodigal Stranger, my favorite 2 World War II movies. Patton and Kelly's Heroes. I only laugh because it's a joke amongst friends of mine about Kelly's Heroes, whether the person who wrote the screenplay knew what World War II was. Because there's a hippie. There's a hippie driving an army tank. Groovy, baby. Okay. And sadly, Patton was shot at a time where they remade movies and did things like use 1960s army tanks in scenes where they shouldn't have had 1960s army tanks. But that's a budgetary thing. I mean, Saving Private Ryan was much more accurate with the look of the equipment and so on. But I think that costs a lot of money to do it that way. Spaghetti Man Helter Skelter was a scary book. I had the copy with the gory pictures in it before they whited them out. I read the book. I don't remember which version I have. Lost in Space. Hogan's Heroes is my favorite World War II documentary. Oh boy. Yeah, Andrew Kruchowski says they were listening to records inside the Sherman or playing records, I believe, during attacks and so on. And they'd say things like, the Germans fire their tanks up at noon every single day to keep the diesels warm. They weren't diesels, but the Germans still did it, implying that the Germans thought they had diesels. But okay. Steve says Saving Private Ryan was so real. There are people who served in the war who couldn't watch it. I've heard that from people who are experts on the war, and from my limited knowledge, although I've read a lot of World War II books, um, the authenticity that they went to try to create was amazing, amazing. Witness multi chick. I'm thinking of moving to Chile to save some science. Any laws I should be immediately aware of? Chile, like the country Chile. Is that the one that's along the western side of South America? I don't know any Chilean laws. I don't, but it's fun to say Chilean. Oh boy. Yeah, blah blah blah. So the opening scene of Private Ryan was horrifying. It was. It absolutely was. Jerry Dodge says, who would be the worst James Bond actor? I'd say Adam Sandler. Um, Jerry Lewis. What kind of science on the Atacama Plateau, witness? Just curious. Carl's Corner, I stepped away. What did I miss? We talked about you for 45 minutes. Yeah, Daniel Kester points out there is a mistake with using the P-51 as ground support because that's what blows up the Tiger at the end of the movie. I suspect they couldn't get their hands on anything else American, and they thought that was close enough. But yeah, that was problematic, and that's the kind of thing that, considering everything else in the movie that was accurate, you kind of look at it and go like 99.9%. Then I guess you know. Andy New York 29 says From Russia with Love was the best Sean Connery Bond film. Yeah, that's the old one, right? One of the old ones. Michael Krause, Woody Allen did a James Bond parody. Which one was that? Prodigal Stranger. I also don't think they had enough working World War II things. They probably didn't. That's why I'm not that critical of it. There are so many World War II movies, like A Bridge Too Far, Patton. Um, I think it was the tanks, but like the Battle for Britain. But they did all these movies with these ensemble casts and big glorious battle scenes. But the tanks are all wrong. But I understand that that's to do them right would have been impossible. So either you make the movie or you don't, right? Mind Bend, The Longest Day. It's another classic. I actually just watched that not so long ago. Yeah, Robert Dylan says they filmed that in black and white because they wanted it to feel more like a documentary. Jerry Dodge, The Day the Earth Stood Still. John Michael Karma, White Tiger, great Russian tank movie. I've talked about that before on this live stream, not today, but previously. White Tiger is a Russian movie, and it's unusual. It's an unusual movie because it's not supposed to be like a real movie in that sense. Um, so it's got some. I hate to call it supernatural, but it's got some. It has a slightly different angle to it. But if you're into World War II and the huger pictures like good versus evil type stuff, White Tiger is amazing, and it's a fascinating story. I can't even begin to tell you the story because it doesn't sound like much unless you watch it. But I've mentioned it before. I found it on Amazon Prime, and if you've got Amazon Prime and you got a little while, watch a little bit and see if it brings you in because I've watched it more than once and I enjoyed it. Francis Chartrance's Valkyrie with Tom Cruise was good. I agree with that. Actually, it was quite good. It was quite good. Yeah, Padres at this point, Idiocracy is now a documentary. Oh. Yeah, Cyberdoc says White Tiger will suck you in subtly. John Michael Karmer says it is now free on YouTube. The whole movie? Cool. Robert Dillon, my grandfather was an engineer on the SS Cristobal, which was pressed into service for World War II, was a headquarters ship for Eisenhower and the Omaha landing. Wow. And I'll tell you right now, if you think about all, like when you look back in history, we know how it ended, right? So the decisions that were made all look good, except for the ones that we now know weren't good. And there was a point in time on D Day where the numbers were looking so bad. There were people who said, you know, something, maybe we should scrap this, regroup, and try again. And they had to make the decision and say, no, we got the toehold, keep pushing, keep pushing. And the cost was quite high. And I've mentioned before, I've walked on Omaha Beach myself. I've walked on that beach at low tide and stood there and observed what was before these guys getting off those landing craft, trying, I got to run over there while carrying all my stuff. And there's people shooting at me and stuff being fired at me. And you can't comprehend it, but think about what was going on board that boat where Eisenhower is surrounded by his staff. They're getting reports in, a lot of confusion. It's one of the largest operations of like all time. And there are people saying, pull the plug on it. Let's save what we can and try again. And he's like, no, go ahead. And of course, we now know it was the right decision to make. Costly one, but a right one. But now you look at it and go, if you stop to think about how much tension was in that room, it would have been mind blowing. G Keyman 565, did you bring back any beach sand? No, I did not. I took some photographs. I actually took a photograph where I purposely went and put my heels in the water and my toes were on dry sand. And I took a photograph, wide angle, so you can see what it was like, the image that you got as that ramp dropped. But I view the place, and I'm not chastising you, but because I've been asked that before. To me, it's a holy place. It's the cemetery is right up there. You can actually see the cemetery from Omaha Beach, and so many people died there, were injured there, or made it through there. That to me, like I had a hard time even like speaking out loud there because to me it's kind of like when you're here, you should have such respect for this place because of what happened here. And if you stop and think about it, it's one of the most I've been to England 4 times. I've been to France twice, I've been to Switzerland, I've been all over the place. And of all the places I've been, Omaha Beach, top of the list. You said, Steve, there's one place that you've been, you get to go back. Boom, that's it right there. And I would actually plan on having more time. And you might say, Steve, what are you going to do there? Same thing I did last time. Just stand there. Just stand there and soak it in and go, Remember what happened here. Can't describe it. Can't do it justice. If you ever get a chance, go. So, hallowed ground, Mark Miller. Yes, you are correct. JJ, my cousin, told the story of driving the landing craft and getting hit by a shell. He ended up on the beach with the army. Wow. Witness multi-chick. Wow, that's cool, Steve. Thanks. Ram 50 V8. Sadly, with all my travels overseas, I've never made it to any of the World War II sites. Yeah, no, to get to the area, you've got to, like if you're in Paris, you got to take a train out to Cannes, and then out there, I rented a car, and so I drove around up and down all the area, but I got out specifically there and visited the cemetery. And that's, of course, the opening and closing bookends of Saving Private Ryan are walking along the bluff. And I've walked that exact same stretch. And I remember when I saw the movie, because I saw the movie after I'd been there. And I'm like, that's it. I've been there. So it was amazing. Yeah, and Daniel Kester says you probably get a similar feeling at Iwo Jima. And there's a bunch of places like that where the casualty numbers are so far off the charts that you have a hard time processing it. But it is past 3 o'clock. I'm going to wrap it up now. I'm so glad we got back together again. We missed it last week. I apologize. I will be back next week. So until then, behave yourself. Thanks. Bye bye.